And we know as professionals in this field, you cannot snap out of depression.
Is that really the only way we know how to communicate with people?
We've seen it before, and if we haven't seen it before, we don't scare easily.
I may be getting yelled at again. I'm not real sure what this is, but sure.
If I wrap you in bubble wrap, I'm not actually preparing you to live life on life's terms.
We need to talk about mental health just as much as we talk about physical health.
Hi everyone, welcome again to another therapy talk. Today I'm really excited. We have Raquel Ravaglioli from Marietta College. She's the director of the music therapy program there. And today we wanted to talk about the power of music and healing. She's going to talk a little bit about our music therapy program, but also mostly about how we can use music to help us get through life, to overcome stressors, and basically just understanding that music can heal just about anything. And so we're really excited, and I really hope that you will enjoy this episode just as much as I have. Can you share how you, Raquel, got to where you are here in Marietta, at Marietta College,
Yep.
and what your journey was like?
Well, I'm from California. I've played violin since I was maybe 2.
Really?
Yep. Both my parents are music educators, so I kind of just grew up with it in the house. And when
Was attached to kind of, you just...
It's the other side.
Other
yeah.
side?
The other side. Yeah. So I just grew up around music. I auditioned at many schools, just music. I was going to be a music major.
Right.
Because that's what I was going to do.
Right.
But I didn't want to be a music education major, and I didn't want to be a performance major. And so I ended up going to University of the Pacific in Stockton, California. And the very first day of class orientations, I heard about music therapy. Mm-hmm. And because I was always interested in psychology, but I didn't want to give up music. So I thought, I don't really know what that is, but I think I'm gonna...
It sounds interesting. I think
I'm gonna go with those students. So I changed my major immediately, and then the next year I added on violin performance, so I did a double major. And after I'd spent 5 years there because of my double major, but after my 5 years, I did my music therapy internship at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, which was a 6-month internship. And then I went to get my master's in music therapy in Montreal at Concordia University.
Wow.
Came back, worked in Santa Monica for 3 years. I worked with early intervention and children with developmental and intellectual disabilities and neurological disabilities, as well as adults. I had my own private practice, but I also worked for a company. And then I started working with behavioral health at an acute psych center. Mm-hmm. So it was short term, 3 to 7 days. Yeah. And they had a few different acuities of units. So that was really interesting. And they had a children's and an adolescent unit as well as a national trauma center. 3.5 years went by, and I saw a job opening. Yeah. And I thought, maybe I'll apply to teach music therapy versus practicing in the clinic. So I did. And now I'm here and teaching at Marietta College, and it's really different teaching music therapy versus doing it, but it's probably one of the best learning experiences I've had.
Sure.
I think it makes me a better music therapist too, because I'm refreshing everything that I learned from undergrad.
Going back to the kind of the foundations and...
Yeah. And now there's new texts out, and there's, research is continuing, so.
What differences do you notice between doing and teaching and...
I think going back to that foundational level was the hardest part for me, because it was so long ago that I got that foundation. My favorite saying right now is, you forget that you didn't know what you didn't know. Because I assume, that, of course, that makes sense, but...
Well, and you keep moving forward and get further and further away from your original teachings. And then, sometimes it's helpful to kind of have that reminder. So you didn't really kind of know anything about music therapy, from what I'm hearing, until you got to the University of Pacific. Did you know growing up or find any healing powers in music, or found like anything in terms of, because it seems like there might have been a part of you that just gravitated towards that, like part of your brain was just ready to kind of notice that department, and like you said, it's kind of really natural. Did you notice kind of any healing properties just growing up, or what that was like, what music was like for you on that kind of level? Curious.
That's a great question. I think that in retrospect, yes, but when I was growing up, I didn't. Knowing what I know now, I can see how it was healing, socializing. It was a support in many ways, but I don't think I realized that then, which I guess as a music therapist, you can help people realize that this is what music can do. I think I was in so many orchestras growing up, but so it was a huge social thing for me. I would drive to the orchestras with my friends, or their parents or my parents would drive us. Even honors orchestras that I would go to, it gave me the opportunity to travel to them.
Right.
I met people from all over the state or country at honor orchestras.
You get a lot of experiences that you normally wouldn't have probably had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole discipline aspect, having to practice, that taught me a lot.
Can you talk about kind of the connection of how music therapy came about?
Started before it was a profession back in World War II, when people were coming back from war. They used music in the hospitals. More research now is focused with children with autism spectrum disorder, or elderly people with dementia, rather than with active military personnel or those who've come back combat, I guess. But music therapy can be used with for social emotional needs, for more mental health populations, or in hospitals and medical settings. In the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, there's tons of evidence-based practice in the NICU with regulating and infants' sensory needs, so positive stimulation that infants can get from touch and from music. There's also developing the sucking reflex, the pacifier activated lullaby device, and it's literally a pacifier that activates music when the infant starts to suck on it. So that is wild. Yep.
Yeah, so it stimulates some type of musical connection or auditory or sound, or
so when the infant starts to suck on the pacifier, it starts playing music. So they learn that they get this positive stimulation when they start to suck, and it can be recorded by the mother or a music therapist. So it's live music that's recorded specifically for that infant.
So it could be the mom singing a lullaby, and it does that, or you
exactly
using your violin and playing a song, or
for developmental needs like children with autism or adults with developmental disabilities. Even learning to count or communicate with words or without words. I've seen so many times, little infants, even if typically developing infants, even playing a movement and music game with them, singing the words and having the tactile stimulation also. After 4 or 5 times of singing the song together, they start to mimic your words, and more babbling, but you can hear the pronunciation of the word that you're singing with them, just because you have all the senses stimulated, the tactile, the auditory, and it's not just speaking, it's music, so it activates all the parts of the brain.
Music is very regulating in the NICU. That's not something that goes away. Like, we don't stop being regulated by music. Rhythm and music kind of is good for our brain.
Neurologic music therapy is another kind of sector or training, and they use rhythm to help regulate somebody's speech or gait, and our bodies entrain to that beat. So even something as simple as a metronome click, your body can self-regulate to that, because rhythm is so intrinsic within us. I mean, you think about the sun rising and setting, or your heart beating, or your breath, and it's something that's happening to us without us knowing or having to control it.
Right.
So when you have that external source of rhythm, your body can automatically entrain to it very easily.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of what music therapy would look like, or how it would help for somebody with social emotional learning?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm going to talk about a specific kind of domain, can I have an age range too, because it's so different?
Sure. High school.
High school. All right, good. So music therapists follow a protocol of referrals, and then assessments and treatment planning, and constantly evaluating what we're doing in treatment. So after getting a referral, we review maybe IEPs or any records that the students might have. You can talk to the student, the teacher, family, just to get to know them, and then observing, of course. So it would be ideal to observe outside of the music therapy session as well.
Sure.
Because as soon as somebody comes into music, it's different.
Right.
So getting a baseline is so important. You know, maybe we see that one person doesn't interact well with the rest of the group, whether it be eye contact or just kind of isolated. Goal for them would be to increase group interaction and very broad. And
social engagements.
Right. So if that's kind of the group goals we're working towards, using improvisation with more auxiliary percussion or drums, maybe if we're talking about high schoolers, to some familiar music, playing along to some familiar music, or lyric analysis or song analysis is some of my favorite interventions with adolescents, because they can bring in the music that's preferred for them, and then we can listen to it together. And just the act of listening together is engaging as a group, because you're doing something together,
right,
and you're actively involved in this process.
Doing something together that is very soothing and rewarding. Like you're not only doing something together, but the music's probably very connecting and rewarding, and
hopefully,
right,
and preferred music for somebody is not preferred music for everybody.
Right.
So having that connection with the music, and also it's a safe place to feel connected, because you don't have to talk, you don't have to look at people, you don't have to move. You just have to sit and actively listen. Then, of course, maybe following it up with some discussion.
Right.
But then it's up to the music therapist to know the right kinds of questions to ask and engage everybody in the group. But it's really interesting when a preferred song is listened to, or some preferred music, and how that really can open somebody up about talking about what they hear in the music. Maybe not just the lyrics, but it could be an instrument that's sticking out to them. Maybe they really love that bass drum, or a different musical element.
Yeah.
If you have this group goal to be more socially engaged, it can look different from every individual. So maybe if one individual is involved in this discussion, that's what you want from them, but another individual is just maybe a change of affect or a change of body posture, or you get one response from them, or maybe a little bit of eye contact, or whatever you're looking for from that individual to tell you that they're more engaged socially, and interacting with others in a way that they feel safe, and it's not like we're making them, it's just it's happening through the music and through the therapeutic relationship, either with the peers within the music therapy session or between the music therapist and the client.
What would goals look like for someone coming in if there's a treatment issue of depression, or just even like you were mentioning autism or stuff like that? What is typically within the scope of music therapy that you try to accomplish?
We work within domains, so there's social emotional, there's expressive, there's a spiritual domain, and so within those domains, if we're looking at social emotional, if your goal is to reduce depression or maybe improve mood, an objective, depending on what kind of theoretical orientation you're working within, can sing with me in a session, or if you're looking more behavioral, maybe we'll smile 3 times, or whatever orientation you're working within, you can kind of
really
form
specific.
those, either be really specific in what you're looking for and how you're going to do it within the music, or just looking for them to be engaged with music, and that kind of shows you that they're less depressed, or maybe they report back to you with some anecdotes from the week, and those aren't just anecdotes, then that's your data that you can take client quotes and say, this is what the client said to me, or this is what we did in the session, and this is why it's showing me that their mood has improved. Music therapy is not standardized because it's so client dependent. And that's why there are so many frameworks within which music therapists can work, and that also is why we each have our own scope of practice. So somebody who has worked with children all their life might not go and work with a stroke patient. Maybe they don't have correct training, because we don't want to ever do damage to our clients.
Sure.
Maybe you have experience working with a whole variety of populations in a lot of different settings, and so your scope of practice is different than somebody else who's just starting out.
Do people in your field if they have an interest to kind of venture out of what they traditionally work in that they would seek more?
As board certified music therapists, we have to have a certain amount of continuing music therapy education credits. So that ensures that we're up with the research and we're, we're competent in our work still.
In our agency, we talk a lot about kind of the neuroscience and how the brain works and kind of the regulatory capacity or building of music, or how like finding non-traditional ways of healing and things like that. But one of the things I was thinking about was, how can music be coping or a way to improve our overall wellness or health, just as much as you would go to a gym to be physically fit?
Yeah. It's the intention of music therapists for any skill or behavior or emotion, whatever it is that we're trying to do in music therapy, to be transferable or generalizable outside of the session. So many times we will educate clients how you can use music for yourself when we're not together, or when we've terminated. So many music-assisted relaxation ideas out there, or music-assisted breathing and relaxation, or progressive muscle relaxation, and you can use music to assist with that. I mean, there's so many resources too for the general public about pain management with music, and how you can use, whether it's meditation or just listening, or self-guided listening and meditation, to use your breath better, or to be in a state of mind that maybe a less anxious state of mind.
Right. So I'm hearing that it's, the music can assist other forms of coping. So help you breathe better, or think clearer in a situation where you have to problem solve, or, things like that, to where you're pairing music with, helping you move more effectively, or... Yeah,
absolutely. And we've all experienced driving in a car and turning on a song, and it just immediately brightens our mood, which I wouldn't say is music therapy, because it's not based in the goals that you're working on, and there hasn't been an assessment, and it's not within evidence-based practice with the therapeutic relationship of a music therapist. But it's true, music can change our mood instantly.
Right.
And knowing what music can do that for you is beneficial, because then you also know what music does the opposite for you too.
I mean, your music therapy taps into the knowledge that music does something to us that, like you said, improves our mood, or just kind of reduces the defenses in terms of being able to open up more. I remember having a music therapist play, I think it was the harp, in a group session, a DBT group session. And you just felt like a different experience than when she wasn't in the session playing. And I think people were, we were talking about some really important stuff and some emotional stuff, and but there wasn't this stress. It was able to kind of comfortably talk about things that probably they wouldn't have talked about if that person wasn't there.
Sure. And you talk about music in the background, and I'm thinking about medical settings and how that adverse stimuli around, like the beeps and the shuffling and people crying or whatever, and how if you're in the hospital, if you can play some music at your bedside, your preferred music, we call it patient preferred music, because that's what the patient likes, and it can kind of mask all the other stimuli going around. And same thing in the NICU, that's why we have the positive stimuli going for the little infants, but anybody can use music in a hospital too, just to mask the stimuli and make it a more positive experience. It has been proven that live music is more beneficial.
Really?
Yep. And actually, speaking of live music, I actually don't use my violin a lot in sessions. The primary instruments that music therapists use are guitar, piano, voice, and percussion. So it's just they're better accompanying instruments to support singing versus violin, which can still be used, but it has to be purposeful.
Right. And I know in my experience, we've done done therapeutic drumming, and just even helping people, kind of even be able to kind of be in sync and rhythm, and how that can kind of be. And I know that I've seen it happen in group where the group is trying to kind of get to a rhythm, you know, together, and then being able to do it all together. I'm curious because I wanted to kind of rewind back to, you were talking about lyric interpretation or kind
Analysis.
of analysis.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that fits into a therapeutic kind of process?
Sure. I'll use an example from when I was in the behavioral health setting. One of the goals that we would work on is, since they were groups and we didn't get a chance to really assess them beforehand, it would be kind of assessment right in the moment and after reading some of their charts and whatnot. And some of the group goals that we would work on would be, for instance, leisure skills. So one of the songs that I used many times because it was a good genre for that age group of people was Dock of the Bay.
Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time.
And so, you know, you talk about, oh, what does this song mean to you? Or when have you listened to this song? Or what lyric sticks out to you?
Right.
And you ask these kind of guiding, open-ended questions for the clients to express what it means to them, and then facilitate the discussion where, oh, leisure time. And then what is healthy leisure time? And how can you spend your leisure time rather than kind of going back to your addiction or something that's unhealthy?
Right.
What can you do? So it's kind of maybe lyric analysis for coping skills if they are reintegrating to the community soon, or teaching about leisure skills, those types of things.
They're learning about themselves based on what stands out to them, or
absolutely. And within the group too, everybody has their own autonomy and what that means to them. Right. Sometimes if a song might trigger a memory, so while you're not trying to work on, you know, memory recall or tapping into the emotional aspect of that memory, that it might do that for them and it can take a different direction.
Some people can use music to make us feel better. Some might use music in unhealthy ways. Maybe it's gearing them up for a fight or gearing them up to do something that they shouldn't be doing, or whatever. Or I'm just gonna, if I'm depressed and I keep playing music that makes me feel worse and worse and worse, and I kind of reinforce those things that are unhealthy for us. Is that something that in music therapy we would kind of assess about ourselves? Like, do I use music in a way that contributes to my well-being or lack of well-being or lack of health or whatever?
I would say absolutely. And this happens a lot with people who have PTSD. Music can trigger those memories. So knowing what music can do that for people, and you don't know unless you talk to your clients or patients and find out somehow, or they open up through a song and say, oh wow, this hit me.
Right.
So being that kind of like container for them, the music can also do that too. So and like I stated earlier, maybe you're not verbally processing something that happened, but then the music can hold them in that space.
What are the kind of ways that people would evaluate whether it's working, or what are some of the things that you kind of evaluate for outcomes purposes in terms of music therapy?
All of the above. It depends on the client and the treatment plan that you've created and how you're taking your data, what you're noticing that's happening for the client in the session. It can be from week to week, how a client is coming back into the session with you. If you're tracking more behavioral type goals, then it might be a lot easier, a frequency count or duration or something of that sort. But so much work also happens that you can't see or track quantitatively. So we use qualitative data, which like stories, quotes, self-report. A compositional, something that's happened compositionally, like songwriting. What words did the client use? How did you process that together?
So how does somebody access music therapy?
Musictherapy.org, the American Music Therapy Association website, has a whole list of music therapists in your area. If they're a member of AMTA, you can find a music therapist through them. Music therapists work in medical settings, in behavioral health, in private practice. A music therapist can work anywhere. Just depends on, again, your scope of practice and where you're working. So to access a music therapist, I think, calling another music therapist, Marietta College, looking at the AMTA website to find if there's one in your area, or the setting that you're at.
Does your program establish, the music therapy program at Marietta College, does it establish a kind of resource list for those things?
Yes, absolutely. For our students, our students are required to observe board-certified music therapists before they go into their field work. Okay. Because you learn best by observing and by experiencing. So sure. I have a whole list of music therapists in the surrounding 2 to 3 hour radius. There's lots up in Cincinnati and Cleveland and Columbus Children's Hospitals, 2 or 3 in this area here. And I know we've partnered with you, working with some schools here. We're working with Fort Fry, we're working with Oriana House and House of Hope. And so we've got a lot of facilities just in the area that we have students, either students or ourselves, working in. What
does kind of music therapy typically look like in the schools? Is that kind of just going into full classes? Is that just kind of more of everybody kind of gets exposure to that, or is that you're doing specific cases in the school, or what's kind of the work that you're doing in the schools? Yeah, specific cases. We have some groups and some individuals, but when we do work with groups, it's a group of students who's been referred to music therapy by either, again, school counselors or the principals or specific teachers. And then out of those groups, we've identified individuals who might benefit most from music therapy also. Our students are working with both groups and individuals and basing their goals and objectives off of IEPs and interviews and that kind of thing. If I'm watching this and I don't know if I want to go to traditional therapy route, like how do I know if I'm going to benefit from music therapy? What would make me choose music therapy as an option? Well, music therapy is a holistic treatment, so it treats the whole person. Try it out and you think it's a good fit for you, then it's a nice route to take. And seeing a music therapist for the first time, we would call that an assessment session, just getting to know the person one-on-one. Sometimes that can include music, sometimes we don't have to use music in an assessment session. Is that the client's kind of interest and choice, or is that something? I think that depends on how the music therapist works. If they're working in a person-centered, client kind of led approach, then the client would lead that, and maybe if the music therapist feels that music is an appropriate thing to use at that time, then they'll start to bring in some music. And I think definitely finding out musical preferences is important in an assessment session. Using music from formative years, so 20s, 30s, that's a huge connecting point because that's their formative years, and that's where they tend to remember the most music from, if you're especially older adults, but also if I even think about my high school and college years, those pieces of music just really stick out to me. I have a connection to them. Right. And typically, probably music draws you to those memories pretty easily or pretty quickly. Because it affects the whole brain, which is amygdala is part of that, right? Yeah, so those emotional connections are strong. Yeah. I think olfactory is the strongest sense that triggers memory, and I think the second one is auditory. Right. You don't have to play music be a musician to benefit from music therapy. Absolutely not. No. In fact, it's probably easier if you're not an actual musician. No, but we've worked with musicians and non-musicians before. If you have just a little bit of musical background or none at all, it's not about really competence the product of music that you're able to produce. It's about the process, and sometimes there can be a product, but it's always facilitated by the music is always facilitated by the music therapist, and you can do that together or receptively, recreating something together, compositionally. You can improvise, but you don't have to have ever even seen a musical instrument before. No, that's good, because I think the only one I had was a recorder. Well, there you go. So that works. That works. You can get some music therapeutic benefit from the recorder. I'm sure. I mean, breath support. Yeah, right. Oral motor. Yeah. And so there's
fine motor.
Fine motor.
Seriously, yeah.
So there's skill development. You're building skills that are going to affect other people. Like there's some direct impact by building those fine motor skills, breath work.
Absolutely.
Things like that are going to have other benefits.
Absolutely. And a musical domain is another domain we can work within. And so while that might not be a primary domain of focus, we can include it because of the development that happens musically can affect everything else.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of, maybe just even for people that might be out there listening that have an interest in music and also helping people, kind of what your music therapy program is about and kind of what that all looks like for somebody that might be kind of thinking about this area of focus?
Sure, like as in going to be a music therapist. So it's a 4-year program at any college that you attend, at Marietta College included.
Yeah.
And after that 4 years, you are required to do an internship. So that has to be completed after your coursework. It can't be completed in the summer just because it's sequential.
Yeah.
And that internship is off-site. You're still a student technically when you're doing that internship, and you are paying for credits.
So is it like a residency for kind of a,
Kind of. You can go anywhere in the country as long as it's accredited by American Music Therapy Association or is associated with the college or university. And after that internship, you are eligible to take the board certification test to become a board certified music therapist. It's not a licensure in Ohio or most states. In a couple states it is, but usually it's just board certified music therapist. And it's a bachelor's level entry degree, but there are master's level programs and doctorate level programs. So you can get as much education in it or not.
Sure.
And there's also a certification or an equivalency program. So if you've already gone to school to be a music educator or maybe a bachelor's in psychology, you can go back for this equivalency program. It's usually about 2 years long plus the internship instead of 4 years. And so you don't have to take your gen eds or anything. And then again, internship and board certification exam.
Is there therapeutic interaction in terms of creation of music?
There's, one of the methods we use is compositional. So if you have recreational, so either recreating a song that you're familiar with or composing your own song. And again, within that, there's other things happening, whether it be if you're with a group, the social interaction. We have a veterans group at Marietta College that we run as music therapists, and there are musicians and non-musicians, and we create music together. We
Really?
Recreate music and sometimes just jam, but it's more than just jamming. It's, this social connection that we get to have through music. And
right. It's just the vehicle to get there,
yeah.
right? It's Any kind of areas that you focus mainly on, or is it pretty broad?
There's so much, and whether it's stroke rehabilitation or somebody with Parkinson's who's trying to have a more steady gait, or a traumatic brain injury and rehabilitating speech or gait, in medical settings, coping with your medical needs or pain management, pain perception, speech development, all kinds of brain development, whether it be motor skills, expressive or receptive communication, and even working with before life to afterlife. So mothers who, before birth, working with them and maybe the birthing process, how you're going to breathe or how you're going to use music while you're giving birth or your breath, to bereavement if you're working with more family-centered care, how they're dealing with a loved one's death. It spans the whole lifespan, and
you don't rule out anything. It's just you just kind of
right. And just again knowing that we work within our scope of practice and as a music therapist, so using music to address the needs of any individual, but very individualized.
I appreciate you coming on and talking about music therapy, and like you mentioned, before. We've collaborated on a few things, and you've been able to kind of benefit some of the work that we're doing and accentuate that. So I think that was really nice, and I have always kind of been a big fan of music therapy and the non-traditional approaches to healing and understanding how music can heal and can help. So I appreciate you taking the time and joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.